One day he got into a boat with his disciples, and he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side of the lake." So they set out, and as they sailed, he fell asleep. And a windstorm came down on the lake, and they were filling with water and were in danger. And they went and woke him, saying, "Master, Master, we are perishing." And he awoke and rebuked the wind and the raging waves, and they ceased, and there was a calm. He said to them, "Where is your faith?" And they were afraid, and they marveled, saying to one another, "Who then is this that he commands even winds and water, and they obey him?" Then they set to the country of the Gerasenes, which is opposite of Galilee. When Jesus had stepped out on land, there met him a man from the city who had demons. For a long time he had worn no clothes, and he had not lived in a house, but among the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him and said with a loud voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For many a time it had seized him. He was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles, but he would break the bonds, be driven by the demon into the desert. Jesus then asked him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Legion," for many demons had entered him. And they begged him not to command them to depart into the abyss. Now a large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him to let them enter these, so he gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and drowned. When the herdsmen saw what happened, they fled and told it in the city and in the country. Then people went out to see what had happened, and they came to Jesus and found the man who the demons had gone, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it told them how the demon-possessed men had been healed. Then all the people of the surrounding country of the Gerasenes asked him to depart from them, for they were seized with great fear. So he got into the boat and returned. The man from whom the demons had gone begged that he might be with them, and Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you." And he went away, proclaiming throughout the whole city how much Jesus had done for him. Verse 40. Now when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. And there came a man named Jairus, who was a ruler of the synagogue. And falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter, about 12 years of age, and she was dying. As Jesus went, the people pressed around him. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. And though she had spent all her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. She came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment, and immediately her discharge of blood ceased. And Jesus says, "Who was it that touched me?" When all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowd surround you and are pressing in on you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, for I perceive that power has gone out from me." And the woman saw that she was not hidden. She came trembling and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." While he was still speaking, someone from the ruler's house came and said, "Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher anymore." But Jesus, on hearing this, answered him, "Do not fear, only believe, and she will be well." When he came to the house, he allowed no one to enter with him, except Peter and John and James and the father and mother of the child. And all were weeping and mourning for her, but he said, "Do not weep, for she is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But taking her by the hand, he called, saying, "Child, arise." And her spirit returned, and she got up at once. And he directed that something should be given her to eat. And her parents were amazed, but he charged them to tell no one what had happened. Well, we don't really have time for a funny story, so I'm just going to give you my 3 points. And then we're going to jump in. So 3 words that are going to help us, help guide our time this morning through these 3 moments in the life of Jesus. So in these 3 moments, we're going to see the power of Jesus, the purpose of Jesus, and the priority of Jesus. That's our 3 words for today. And they all started with P. It's just the way it played out. It's a gift from the Lord for you note takers. So his power, his purpose, and his priority. So first, let's look at his power. So in our first moment, Jesus and his disciples are going to hop into a boat, and they're going to head to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Verse 22, one day he got into a boat with his disciples, and he said to them, let us go across to the other side of the lake. And so they set out. And as they are heading across the Sea of Galilee, a massive storm rolls in. The Sea of Galilee was known for this because of its location between the mountains and the Mediterranean Sea. In the desert, it was common for there to be massive storms to appear on this body of water. And the storm that appears seems to be extra terrifying in this moment. Because it says, as they sailed, he fell asleep, and a windstorm came down on the lake, and they were filling with water and were in danger. Now, something to keep in mind, several of these disciples were veteran fishermen. They had probably been in storms like this before, or at least similar to this, but this storm seems to be different. They are terrified in this moment. They think they're going to die, and where is Jesus? He's asleep. Right? He was in the stern, asleep on a cushion, verse 38, and they woke him and said to him, teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? So just imagine if you were in that boat with Jesus and your rabbi, your leader is asleep on a cushion in the boat. Jesus, do you not care that we are about to die? It's this mixture of fear and anger, right? I'm terrified of this storm, and I'm angry at you as our leader for sleeping while this is happening. Therefore, that must mean that you don't care. And we have to catch this because this is a common thing for humanity to do. I'd be willing to bet that we all do this. The question the disciples are asking isn't so much a question as much as it is an accusation. Right? It's an accusation against Jesus' compassion. Jesus, this bad thing is happening, and it seems like you don't care. How many of you can resonate with that, have been in those moments? Life has gotten out of control. I have no control over it, and it seems like you're asleep on the cushion. How is Jesus going to respond? Verse 24. And they went and woke him, saying, Master, Master, we are perishing. And he awoke, and he rebukes the wind and the raging waves, and they ceased, and there was a calm. I love Mark's recording of this story. We're told that he looked at the wind and the rain and the waters, and he said, peace, be still. In Greek, those are two words that both mean silence. So the first one is in the present tense, meaning right now, and the second one is in the perfect tense, meaning continue to do that. So he essentially, in this moment, looks at the wind and the waves and says, be quiet! And stay quiet. How many of you said that to your kids? Right? And you want to know what's absolutely stunning about this? The wind and the waves obey him. Right? They actually obey him. It's almost like he is talking to the sea as if it's a child. Stop! Don't say another word. He does not call on some higher power. He does not go through some ritual. He is the power in this moment. The text says, not only does the sea obey, but it says there was a great calm. If you've ever been on a lake or a body of water and it's just still. It's not as the wind slowly winded down and the waves got smaller and smaller. It's this idea of silence, instant calm. They were on still seas. I love that picture. Verse 25, he said to them, where is your faith? Where is your faith? Now, why does he say that to them? Why does he say that to them? I think he wants to remind them of who's in the boat with them, right? He's building, and every moment he's teaching them more and more about who he is, right? And this moment ends with a question. Who then is this that he commands even winds and water, and they obey him? And the question is left hanging there so the reader themselves can answer that question. And the next two stories, it's going to continue to build on that theme, right? Who then even is this? Who is Jesus? Who is this one that can command the wind and the seas? Well, if they knew their Old Testament, which many of them did, they knew exactly who could control the wind and the waves. Psalm 89, verses 8 and 9 says, O Lord God of hosts, who is mighty as you are, O Lord, with your faithfulness all around you. You rule the raging of the sea. When its waves rise, you still them. In ancient cultures and legends, the sea was the symbol of unstoppable destruction. The Jewish people greatly feared the sea. There's a famous story of King Canute. He was a Danish king in the 11th century. The countries he was overseeing were sucking up to him, and they started to call him God. They started to see him as some sort of deity. And one day he gathered all his leaders and on the side of the sea, and he looked at them and he said, "Hey, am I divine?" And then he turned to the water and he went, "Stop!" And the sea just kept coming. He was saying, only God can stop the sea. I can't. I'm not God. And that's the point here, that Jesus is God. And what's more terrifying than the raging sea? Someone who has power over that very sea. Did you notice that the disciples are scared of the ocean? But after Jesus calms the storm, how do they react? It doesn't say that they were joyful. It doesn't say that Jesus calmed the storm and they started celebrating. They didn't puff out their chest and say, well, when I was in the boat with Jesus, he did this and it was awesome. They didn't start singing, "Yes, Jesus loves me, yes, I know." How did they respond to what just happened? They were afraid. Why are they afraid? We're all scared of things we can't control, but you know what's even more terrifying? Someone who has unlimited control. They don't have a category for what they just saw, and that terrifies them. They had a category for the storm. They had seen storms before, but this was different. And I think most of us, when we think about the power of God, or another word you'd say in that idea is when we think about the holiness of God, right? Typically we think of right and wrong, where we're holy if we do right things. But holiness is more than doing right. Holiness means to be set apart. And when they saw Jesus, they said, "He's set apart from anything I've ever seen in my life." That's holiness. That's holiness. They didn't have a category for it. When people encounter the holiness of God in Scripture, they are terrified because it's different than anything else we've ever seen in our lives. They were afraid of the storm because they knew its power. But Jesus, they had never seen anything like it. So they were even more afraid. They had no category for the God-man in the boat with them. Some of us think of God as this deity out in the cosmos that, yes, made us, but the reality is the holiness of God is not some far distant concept, not anymore for these disciples. The holiness of God is with them in the boat. The same God who spoke the universe into existence is sitting a few feet away from them, sleeping on a cushion. The one who formed the oceans is now commanding the ocean in their presence. And that realization is overwhelming, especially for them and even for us today, right? Because it means that the person with them in the boat is not just a teacher. He's not just some miracle worker. This is not just some prophet sent from God. That God himself is in the boat with them. And when that reality begins to sink in, it's terrifying because if he really is Lord over the wind and the waves, then that means he is Lord over every single thing in my life. He's Lord over my plans. He's Lord over my fears. He's Lord over my suffering. He's Lord over all the storms in our lives right now. And here's the tension of the passage. The disciples were afraid of the storm, but the real question was never whether the storm would obey. That wasn't a question, right? The real question was whether they would believe that he was the one who controlled the storm. That's the question. And that's the question sitting in front of every single one of us today. Is Jesus truly the one that could command all the storms, both the physical and spiritual storms in my life? If Jesus is truly the one who commands the wind and the waves, do we have faith? Do we actually believe that he can do that? Or will we keep accusing the one who controls the storms? Jesus, do you even care? Or will we trust the one who can silence the sea, right? And here's the reality. Sometimes Jesus will calm the storm. Sometimes he will. Sometimes, though, he'll let the storm rage for a while in our lives. Amen? Sometimes he'll calm it, but sometimes he'll let the storm continue to rage. And this passage reminds us of something we desperately need to remember. The greatest safety in the world is not the absence of storms. The greatest safety in the world is being in the boat with the one who rules them. It's not that we don't need storms, it's that we need to be in the presence of Jesus. So then the question becomes, okay, if he has that kind of power and holiness, then how is he going to use it? And this is where we see the purposes of Jesus. Jesus and the disciples land on the shore, and they get to the country of the Gerasenes. That's Gentile country. And when they get ashore, a man with an unclean spirit comes sprinting at Jesus, and this man is absolutely broken. Luke just says that he has demons, right? We're told that he lives among the tombs. He literally lives among the things that are dead. He's completely isolated from society. In the other Gospels, it says that no one could bind him anymore. That means that at one point, people tried to control him and keep him contained. But whatever he had gotten into has become uncontrollable. And what does he do in the tombs? Mark says that night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. So he's literally crying out and cutting himself. So this guy, he's out of control and he's self-destructive. Here's what we need to catch. This man is a picture of the state of our spiritual soul without Christ. The Bible says that without Christ, we are all children of the devil, held captive to his will. He's all of us. And he sees Jesus on the shore, and he runs to him. Verse 28, when he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him and said with a loud voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." He tells him that his name is Legion. A legion was the largest unit of a Roman army, and at full strength had 6,000 soldiers. That doesn't mean that there were 6,000 demons in this man, only that this guy didn't just have one demon, but many. And then we see Jesus cast the demons out of the man and into a herd of pigs. So let's spend some time on that, okay? What's the deal with the pigs? How many of you have ever asked that question? What's the deal with the pigs here? Okay, two things. First thing with the pigs. You see the ultimate aim of the demonic world with what they do with the pigs. They kill them all. And if Jesus isn't going to let them destroy this man, then they will settle for the pigs, which still would be considered God's creation. Second, there are many who believe that the pigs are a picture of the final fate of the demons, that Jesus is demonstrating what is to come. In Matthew's account of the story, the demons asked Jesus, "Have you come to torment us before the appointed time?" And that tells us a couple things. That the demons know that there is an appointed time that they will be judged and punished. So it's recognition by the demons that one of Satan's strongholds, the spirit world, is being invaded and overpowered by Jesus. But that this moment is a demonstration of what's coming. Revelation 28:10 says, "And the devil who had deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur where the beast and the false prophet were, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever." That's why in Luke's account, the demons say to Jesus in verse 31, "And they begged him not to command them to depart into where? The abyss." They know that their end is coming. That's the thing with the pigs. Well, word begins to spread about what happened, and everyone comes out to see Jesus. Verse 35, the people went out to see what happened, and they came to Jesus and found the man whom the demons had gone, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. I just imagine that scene. They walk up, and this guy's there, and he's like, "Hey, what's up?" And they're like, "What?" "Excuse me?" She's like, "Hey, you want some coffee? Want some tea?" I don't know, I just think that's funny. What's the point? Jesus, in all of his power and authority, has come to bring freedom and peace to the defiled and shamed. He brings your dignity back. And I hope that there's probably a few of you that probably need to hear this. There is no sin and no shame and no other power that can overcome the powerful peace of Jesus and his purpose for your life. He brings freedom to your life that you had given up on long ago. The purpose in his power. He is God in the flesh. There is no one like him. But he did not come to abuse that power. He came to bring freedom to those who are in captivity. His purpose is to bring peace and freedom to our dead souls. He finds people crying out in the night and brings life back to them. I'm wondering, as I was studying this, I'm wondering if any of us have ever had this train of thought. Well, Colton, that sounds nice for him or for you, but God doesn't seem to be doing that for me. I feel defiled. I feel violated. I feel out of control. I feel like I have chains on me. And you know what? I have cried out to him, and he hasn't ever done anything. Some of you read this story, and all you can think of is, well, that's good for him, but that will never happen for me. Been there and done that with Jesus, and he was silent. Well, I would say the last thing we need to look at then is this last moment and the priority of Jesus. So if that's you, don't tune out just yet. The people of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave, partly because they blame him perhaps for killing all their pigs, but also they're terrified of him. The guy who was possessed by Legion probably terrified the people of that city. So what's more terrifying than that guy? Someone who can control him. And by the way, did you notice that the guy asked if he could leave with Jesus? He wants to be a disciple. That's awesome. And what does Jesus tell him? He says, no, return to your home. Declare how much God has done for you. He tells him, no, go and tell your story about what has happened here today. He's commissioned to be a part of the mission of Jesus. And history tells us that in the early days of the church, the gospel in this area spread like wildfire. Isn't that amazing? Do you think this guy was out there talking about when after Jesus rose from the dead? He's the one who cast the demons out of me. Do you think people started to listen when they saw Jesus on the street and then they saw this guy going, that was him? Holiness and power like no other. The gospel spread like wildfire. The church flourished in this area. This man's testimony surely had an effect on that region. But Jesus leaves and goes back across the sea, and when he gets to the other side, another man. In the world's eyes, this man would be the opposite of the demon-possessed man. But another man named Jairus falls on his knees. Everyone's falling on their knees when they see Jesus in these stories. You got crazy, naked, demon-possessed guy, and now you have a ruler of the synagogue. Religious, prestigious, wealthy, and he comes in desperate need. There came in verse 41, there came a man named Jairus who was a ruler of the synagogue, and falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter, about 12 years of age, and she was dying. Now, I want you to put yourself in Jairus' shoes. What if that was your little girl? Jairus sees his dying daughter, and he hears that Jesus is here. He puts aside his religious prestige, and he falls on his knees. It's a beautiful act of faith by Jairus. And how does Jesus respond? Jesus says yes. He agrees. He says, we don't have it recorded, but he goes with Jairus to heal his daughter. The famous healer is going to heal my daughter. Everything's going to be okay. The problem is there is a massive group of people in between Jesus and this little girl. The text says that as Jesus went, the people pressed in around him. Jairus would have been well known in this town. And you combine that with the celebrity of Jesus, and that results into everyone wanting to see what's about to happen. And you can almost feel the tension in the story. There's a little girl who's dying right now. With every moment, her life is wasting away. And Jesus has showed up at exactly the right time. There's still time to get to her, right? They're on their way to heal her, to save her life, but there's a crowd all around him. And they all have this anticipation. They all want a piece of Jesus. They all want what's going to see unfold here. They're all trying to get to him. And I'm sure many people are wondering, is he going to get there in time? I mean, there had to have been servants and people yelling, get out of the way, make a path. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Jesus stops. He stops. A woman touches Jesus. She had an illness. We're told that she lived with it for 12 years. No doctor could heal her. And so she thinks, if I can just touch him, I will be healed. Verse 44, she came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment. And immediately her discharge of blood ceased. And when she touches him, Jesus just stops. So make sure we catch this, right? Jesus is hurrying towards a little girl who is dying. Her dad surely leading the way. And Jesus stops, and the disciples have no idea what's going on. In verse 45, it says, Jesus said, who was it that touched me? And when everyone's like, no, not me. Peter said, Master, the crowd surround you and are pressing in on you. Jesus said, someone touched me. I felt the power go out. So the disciples have no idea what's going on. They're like, you're surrounded by people. Of course they're going to touch you, but Jesus will not let this go. Mark tells us that Jesus was looking around to see who done it. He had perceived in himself, the text says, that power had gone out of him. So he's not going to stop until he finds this person. Now, let's go back to Jairus. If you're Jairus, and Jesus is looking around for this person who touched him, what do you think's going through his head? Who cares? I've got a little daughter. She's dying. Can we go now? But finally, the woman comes forward, and everyone has to wait for a whole conversation to happen. Verse 47, when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling. This woman had to be filled with so much fear. Everyone's around her. She's been unclean for years. And now Jesus, the celebrity, the Holy One, has called her out. So it says, trembling and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. And then look at this, verse 48. He said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. I want us to think about this for a second. Her problem was serious. No one's denying that. The people wouldn't have denied that her problem was serious. A discharge of blood would have been uncomfortable. It would have been embarrassing. It would have made her an outcast in that society. We've already been told that she spent all of her money on a physician. She couldn't be healed by anyone. So yeah, this situation is tragic. But it's a tragic situation that has been going on for 12 years. So we're going on for 12 years. It could have waited another 30 minutes, right? It could have waited another 15 minutes, another hour. I mean, what Jesus just did, if that was today and it was at a hospital, it would be considered malpractice. If I took my wife to the hospital and she was dying, she was to the point of death, and I ran into the emergency room and I said, hey, I need a doctor. And as the doctor came forward, he grabbed us and we started going into the hospital, out of the car, into the hospital. And then imagine a little kid comes up and he says, I've got a scratch on my arm. And the doctor stops helping my wife to put a Band-Aid and give this kid a lollipop. I'd be like, I'm going to sue you. That's not right. I would be mad. What are you doing? Understand the urgency here. The kid can wait. That's basically what Jesus does here. You know what's interesting? Nobody wanted this conversation with the bleeding woman. The disciples didn't want it. Jairus sure didn't want it. The bleeding woman didn't even want it. She just wanted to touch him, be healed, and get out of there. The last thing she wanted was for the attention to be put on her. Nobody wants this moment but Jesus. So what's Jesus doing here? I think he's teaching everyone in this moment two important truths about who he is and how he operates. First, to the disciples, to Jairus, and to the crowd. He is saying, I will not be hurried by your purposes. I will not be hurried. I will accomplish my work according to my timing. And that is a hard lesson for all of us to learn, right? We want Jesus to do something for us right now. We want him to satisfy our needs, even if they're real needs, right now at this moment. And he is not mistaken in his patience. He has purpose behind the waiting. He has priorities. Second, to this woman, he is saying, your healing is not what will ultimately give you peace. Your healing is not what will ultimately give you peace, but it's because of your faith that you will find ultimate peace. Verse 48, he said, daughter, your faith has made you well, and he says, go in peace. It's almost like the healing of her disease is just an afterthought. But the real gift here is the faith that has brought her peace. Probably peace that she had never experienced before. Jairus' people come and they say, hey, your daughter's dead. She's gone. Don't even bother the teacher anymore, which gives us the impression that people were bothering Jesus about it, and they tell them to just stop. What's done is done. I mean, how do you feel if you're Jairus in this moment? But verse 50, it says, Jesus, on hearing this, answered him, do not fear, only believe, and she will be well. So for those of us who feel the pain and suffering of life, you've asked for God, and you've asked God for help, and it seems like help has not come. And I pray that you would hear this. Sometimes God will make us wait. Sometimes God will make us wait because he will not be hurried. That does not mean that he is absent or that he has forgotten you. He is the sovereign king, but he will accomplish his will with his own timing. And his plans are better than your plans. He makes Jairus wait until it seems that all hope is gone. And he tells Jairus, hey, do not fear, only believe. What he's saying there is, keep trusting me. Even when it seems like all hope is lost, keep trusting me. Keep pressing in towards me. He wants us to move towards him in faith. The bleeding woman just wanted to touch and run. She just wanted the bleeding to stop. But what she got was a face-to-face conversation with God himself. That's better. Jairus just wanted some sickness healed. But what's about to happen is better. Verse 51, and when he came to the house, he allowed no one to enter with him except Peter and John and James and the father and mother of the child, and all were weeping and mourning for her. He said, do not weep, for she is not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. Taking her by the hand, he called, saying, child, arise. He will accomplish his work according to his timing. So what's Jesus' priority? Jesus, time and time again, will prioritize his work according to his gracious plan. And he will not be hurried in that. And I know that frustrates us, that he will not be hurried. But he does have a purpose. He does have a priority. And we should be thankful for that because his plan is better. And so let me ask you, do you trust him? And I know that that phrase has been thrown around a lot in church. Hey, well, you just got to trust God. How many times have you been told that? But it's a saying for a reason. It's do you actually trust him? Do you trust that his plan is better than yours? Are you willing to fall at his feet and say, I have faith that you are holy, that you have all power, that your purpose is good, and that your priorities are for my benefit, for your glory? Are you willing to stake your career, your family, your future in faith on God? If you are, then what you will find is something better than the fixing of circumstances. You will find the power of Jesus, which has no rival. You will find the purposes of Jesus, that he comes to bring freedom to the chained and broken. You will find the priority of Jesus, that he has come to bring peace. So when you step back and look at these three stories together, you begin to see why Luke places them side by side. In the first story, Jesus shows his power. He stands up in the boat and commands the winds and the waves, and they obey him. Creation listens to him. And in the second story, Jesus shows his purpose. He steps onto a shoreline and confronts an entire legion of demons. Think about this, the forces of hell recognize him and they obey him. And then in this third story, Jesus shows his priority. A bleeding woman touches him. A dying girl is raised by him. So here's what we learn. Disease listens to him. Death listens to him. Storms obey him. Demons obey him. Disease obeys him. Even death obeys him. So the question that the disciples asked in the boat becomes the question Luke wants every reader to ask. Who then is this? And Luke's answer is unmistakable. This is God in the flesh. The wind knows it. The demons know it. Disease knows it. Death knows it. Jesus is saying in every one of these moments, I am God. But the shocking thing about these stories is not just who he is, it's who he does all of this for. It's how he demonstrates it. Think about the people in these stories. You've got a group of terrified fishermen, a naked, demon-possessed outcast living in a graveyard, a poor woman who's been suffering for 12 years, a desperate father with a dying daughter. None of these people had real power. None of them had control. None of them had answers. But Jesus moves towards every single one of them. Which means when you put all three of these stories together, the message becomes clear. Jesus is saying, I am God and I care about you. I care about you. I have power over the storm and I care about the people in the boat. I have power over demons and I care about the man that everybody else gave up on. I have power over sickness and I care about the woman who everyone else overlooks and wants me to ignore. Luke wants us to see something here. The God who rules the universe is also the God who stops for one person in the crowd. The God who commands a sea is also the God who calls a suffering woman daughter. The God who terrifies demons is also the God who takes a little girl by the hand. And we have to understand that this impacts how we think about God, how we think about life every single day, because some of us walk into this room, and if you want to use the metaphor of storms, you've got a lot of storms happening in your life. And you're thinking, Jesus, do you even care? Some of you feel like the man in the tombs. You're trapped, you're ashamed, life feels out of control. Some of you feel like the bleeding woman. You've suffered for a long time, and nothing has changed. Some of you feel like Jairus. You're waiting on God, and it feels like he's taking too long. And look, I think Luke would say to every single one of us, stop looking at yourself and stop looking at your circumstances. Look at the power, the purpose, and the priority of Jesus. And I think these stories are shouting to us, the God who has power over everything, he actually does care for you. He actually does care for you. He not only loves you, but he likes you. Like we talk about love, it's kind of this abstract idea. But when you talk about, like if I ask you, who do you love? You probably list a lot of people. And then I ask you, who do you like? You probably have a shorter list. He not only loves you, but he likes you. And if that's true, then the question for us is the same question that Jesus asked on the boat, which is, where is your faith? Right? Where is your faith? Will you trust him, even in the storm, even in the waiting, even when the crowds slow everything down? Because the safest place in the universe is not a life without storms, but the safest place in the universe is at the feet of the Holy One who rules them. Because he's set apart from everything and everyone else, and he calls us to himself, at his feet, in his presence. I think some of us approach the Christian life kind of how we approach church. I want to sit back a little bit and just watch someone else preach, and I'll learn from them. Perhaps we should think about the Christian life like the people who kneeled at the feet of Jesus in these stories. Maybe that's a more accurate picture. Completely surrendered, willing to abandon all fear, to be completely vulnerable with God, and to say, hey, I'm not just going to sit on the back, I'm not just going to sit and watch, but I want to participate in what you're doing. I want to be a part of your power, your purposes, and your priority. Some of us have never surrendered to him like that. We're kind of comfortable watching. But Christians don't watch. They participate, and they become like Jesus. Right? And he calls us, hey, come be a part of what I'm doing. And it's in that place we get to see more of what God is capable of doing. Amen?